Hey guys, so on today's episode we're going to install some 5100 shocks. We're going to do a quick lift on the Tacoma, which I'm pretty excited for. It's a very basic setup and I'll show you guys the process. I've never worked on a truck or lifting a truck. I've dropped cars on coilovers before, so it shouldn't be too much different. But we're going to start with the front. I'll show you the shocks and springs that I picked up. So right here you could actually see these are the rear shocks for the Tacoma. These are called the 5100s, and the shock alone doesn't give you a raise. The back shock actually has more travel. I still need to add a leaf to the rear leaf springs. I'll explain that later. Here's the front. I bought these for $100. The shocks have a little wear and tear on them, but they're not leaking any oil whatsoever. They still look pretty good. So I'm gonna go ahead and run it with them, because this setup right here, I think these are like $200 just for the springs, or $250, and these are probably $100 to $150 per shock. So for $150 you can't beat it. We're gonna run them and see how it works. So this setup's pretty cool. As you can see on these notches, you can change them and raise your truck on a stock spring. Well, you have to buy new, you have to have fresh springs in the trucks from 2006, so they're pretty old. So I actually ended up going this route where it has Toytec springs. These are rated for about roughly a 3.5 inch lift, and then we set the little notch on the last notch, and the spring is actually going to do the lifting instead of the notches on the shock. So this is a pretty common setup that a lot of people use. It's probably like the intermediate setup. I think the cheaper setup, I'll explain in a bit. So in my opinion, there's like 3 setups that you can go with, and this being the intermediate setup with the shock and coil setup. So basically the cheapest setup will be putting blocks on your rear diff and a spacer in your front OEM shocks. The medium setup is like this, is 5100s with a shock that has more travel, adding a spring that's going to give you the lift, and in the back adding the AAL leaf, which I'll show you guys later on. It's a little harder, but I feel like it's a better alternative, and I always like to go with like the medium setup. I don't have a budget to go all out and go with the higher end stuff. The higher end stuff is basically a strut, and they carry like a reservoir for the oil, so when the shock is going up and down, it has a better cooling capability, and they're a little beefier. Companies like Icon, Toytec, there's another couple companies out there, but yeah, those are the 3 options. The first option, when I said with the spacers and the blocks, it costs you about $200 to $250. The setup I'm doing here is I pieced it out. I probably spent $250 because I bought everything used. But if you would buy it straight out of the box brand new, you're looking at probably I don't know, somewhere in the $500 range, maybe $600 range. I'm not too sure. I would have to do the math. But I know the shocks are about $120 per shock. They're not that expensive. The springs are a little more expensive, and the AAL leaf is like $85 to $150. So yeah, so let's get to it and I'll show you. And if you guys have any comments, please leave comments down below and I'll try to help you as best as I can. So one thing I want to do before I start is measure from here to the ground to see how much we actually get on this setup. According to the homework I've done and the research I've done, it should be roughly around 2.5 to 3 inch raise. So let me measure that out and see what that comes out to. So this is a stock setup right now, what comes from Tacoma, or what comes from Toyota. Keep in mind that the tires and wheels I have are from a newer Tacoma, from a 3rd gen, not a 2nd gen. So we're like right here. Okay. So I cheated, I already did the other side, so I have a little more experience on teaching you guys how to do this side. It wasn't too bad. I think if I had to rate it from like a 1 to 10, it's gonna be like a 7. And it does help if you have someone to help you put it in. So we're gonna go ahead and take off these wheels. You're gonna need a 21 millimeter, preferably 1/2 inch if you could get it. And I'm using a Harbor Freight jack, which is way too small, but this is all I have because I used to be in the import scene, so cars weren't that tall, and it worked perfectly and it helped to slide under. Now I have to use one of these blocks to get it up, and this is probably not rated for this because it's only 1.5 ton, but we're only picking up like 50% of the car, and the jack stands that I have are 3 tons, so that's good enough. So the next thing we're going to remove is the bracket for the brake lines. This one's a 10 millimeter. We're losing light already. Okay, So the next brake line bracket is this one, which is a 14 millimeter. We're gonna remove the sway bar bracket so it gives us more play to remove the strut, and that's a 14 millimeter. Alright guys, so the next bolt we're gonna take out, sway bar linkage. So it's gonna be a 17 socket. Alright guys, we gotta back out this bolt. So my recommendation is to leave the nut loose and then hit it with the hammer. There you go. It's like that, you don't strip the actual bolt. There, it's out. So the next thing we're gonna remove is the upper control arm with the spindle. And we're gonna remove this, I think it's called the cotter pin. Okay, the bolt for the spindle is a 19 socket. And then for this again, leave that nut a little loose. And then you're gonna go to town with the mallet right here until the spindle flexes and releases that ball joint. Tired. There it goes. All right, so we're gonna take out 3 bolts up here on the shock tower. They're gonna be a 14 millimeter socket. All right, so the next bolt we're gonna take out is a 19 millimeter for the shock tower on the bottom. Like butter. We'll put this back and then hit it again with the hammer. There you go. Yeah. All right. So he's got to finesse it out. It comes out.
Feeding in through your side.
Okay. Like that. With the one in the back. Just one in the back. Just. You have to push down on it.
I'm gonna help you right now.
Okay. You got it? Yeah. Oh yeah, dude. See, we're professionals now.
Dude, it took way faster too.
Okay, yeah. Stuff like that. Here's a carrot with money.
Yeah. So I told him, we load up our bike.
Wait. Right. I
It could have been just the front side.
Yeah.
Whoa. Holy shit, it didn't even go down that. Damn! You're sporting them coils now.
It's lifted?
Yeah.
Last weekend we finished the front end and we ended up getting like a 2.5 inch raise, and I got an alignment and everything's good, and actually wasn't that bad alignment. I'll show you guys the paperwork later, and it seems like I don't need upper control arms, which I'm pretty stoked because they're very expensive. They're about 600 bucks and I don't want to spend money on that. I want to get wheels and tires pretty soon. So today we're going to concentrate on the back, and I'm going to show you guys real quick what we're doing. And approximately with this setup we should be getting like a 1 to 2 inch lift, which will equal what the front is, which is a 2.5 inch lift. And I measured the front with measuring tape, so I know we got about a 2.5 inch lift. I'm gonna measure the back so you guys can see what it is before we do the install, and then let me show you the parts that we're gonna be using today. All right, so here's the setup. If you guys can see it, we have 2 shocks for the rear. They're the Bilstein 5100s. Very basic setup. This right here does not raise your truck at all. All it does is it has more travel, so you can add a raise and you don't blow out the shock like the stock shocks. So what's going to do the raise is actually this add-a-leaf spring that we order from Toytec suspensions, or Toytec lifting or something, or Toytec lift. They're out in Denver, Colorado, I believe. A very reputable company that I did some research and people like their products. So basically we're going to add these 2 leaf springs onto the original. It comes with 2 hardware bolts. It shouldn't be too hard. They actually did a YouTube video on how to do it, so we're gonna go buy that video And here's one of the C-clamps that I went and got at O'Reilly's, and they have that. And we're gonna use this guy, heavy duty. So let's get to it. All right, so the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna remove the shock bolt on the bottom. It's a 17 millimeter. Okay, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna use a 14 to take off that top bolt on the actual shock. You're gonna use a vice grip to hold the shock from spinning. So now you can just do it by hand. Now to pull the shock out, you pull off the washers, and then to remove the shock, just compress it and then slide it out of the sleeve. And go forward, Ray. Perfect. So the next one we're gonna remove is a 13 bolt for the brake line, because we gotta drop the differential and we don't want it to put any stress on it. So next thing we're gonna do is remove the U-bolts. It's a 19. Like money. Make sure it drops right so we remember how it was set. They said in the video that it doesn't matter what side that bracket you put it back, but we want to try to put it back the same way we took it off. And now we can remove the U-bolts. The next thing we got to do is clamp this leaf springs so we can remove that. And I think that's a 12 or a 14 millimeter. So that's the next thing we're going to do. So the next thing you want to do is you want to put C-clamps on each side. I tightened this one already. This is the heavy duty one, which we're going to tie really hard right now. And we're going to use like a 22 millimeter socket. Now we're going to take off the 14 millimeter bolt. Oh yeah, perfect. There. Now we drop the differential. The next thing we want to do is remove this thingy-majig. I don't know what it's called. I think it's called a leaf spring retainer. We're going to lift it and then we got to move that bolt. So go ahead, Ray. Perfect. So there's the OEM bolt compared to the add-a leaf from Toytec. So you can see it's longer because we're actually adding another leaf. All right, so I'm gonna jack it up while Ray tries to line it up. Jack it up a little more. Jack it up more. All right, so right now we're putting those C-clamps on to bracket down the leaf spring so we can tighten that middle bolt that you see right there. All right, so right now we're clamping it with the C-clamps, and the whole idea for the C-clamps, when you look right in there, in that section right there, you can't see light through the other side, because that's how you know you're ready to clamp that bolt in the middle all the way down. So you can see the center of the leaf spring, there's no gap. You see how there's a gap right there? When you can see light, you don't want that in the middle. Now Ray's tying up that center stud, which is a 14 millimeter. So the next thing we're gonna do is cut the bolt with the Sawzall, because it's too tall. All right, so we have to cut it so that sits flush. All right, I go for it, Ray. Cut it. Dang, you're good. First try. All right, so right now we're putting the U-bolts, the bottom four bolts and washers. Make sure you tighten those really good before you take the C-clamps off. So one thing that we learned is if you put it the bottom first like this and just jam it in, don't start on the top like we did on the other one. We were struggling for an hour. So go ahead, Ray, and then put the screw in. So you compress it and then stick it in the hole.
Well, okay, I told you because I never.
Yeah. All right, guys, as you can see, we finally lifted the truck. I'm so stoked. I'm so happy. So let me explain exactly what was the setup that we did. So we basically went with shocks all around. We went with the Bilstein's 5100. It's one of the most popular ways to lift your truck because of the price and the quality. It's a really good quality, and it's very easy to install too. And then for the springs, you can use your OEM springs, but a truck like mine that's 2006 and it's pretty old, they get worn down and they're not gonna be as stiff as a brand new truck. So that being said, we went with the Toytecs, so we get that exact 2.5-inch lift that we're looking for. So just FYI, when you guys do this lift, either by OEM new springs or get aftermarket. These are the Toytecs, and I'll leave the links down below for all the stuff I use for this truck in particular. Now, as soon as we changed it, the install, you guys just saw the video of installing it. It wasn't too hard, to be honest with you. If you got a friend, I would suggest you do it with 2 people, not just one. Probably the hardest part is finding those clamps, the ball joints that we use for the leaf springs for the AAL leaf. I had to go to 2 stores. I went to AutoZone and I went to Pep Boys, and they had it, and they're called ball joint removers. They're not C-clamps, ball joint removers. They're expensive, about 112 bucks to rent it. When you return it, you get your money back. I highly recommend it. Any other way would not work. I tried to use regular C-clamps. They were not strong enough. I had to get bigger ones. As the ride quality goes, at first I wasn't a fan, to be honest with you. This setup feels a little more bouncy, like it could take a bounce, obviously, because that setup's more meant for off-roading. And I think it has to do a lot with my spring setup. I don't know if it has to do with the shocks too much. But yeah, at first I didn't like it. But now having it 2 to 3 months, I think I have it 3 months now. I don't notice the difference, so I can't even tell. So you get used to it. It's not that bad, to be honest with you. I'm actually happy with this setup. I could go through dips really easy when I go off-roading. I did go off-roading. I went through ruts, I went through dirt, I went through sand, water, mud, all that stuff, and the truck performed awesome. I think the thing I noticed the most was the ride quality. It was a lot softer. It's kind of like, if the best way to describe it is like if you go on a fire trail and you don't air down, this shit's gonna be bouncy as hell. If you let some air out, it's not gonna be super bouncy. It'd be a little more smoother ride. That's exactly how I felt having this new setup. I think it has more give and more play to absorb the ruts, the rocks, and the dirt, and anything that comes your way, which made it a lot better. In the back, we did a Toytec AAL leaf spring, which actually gave us the lift in the back. So according on paper, we should be having a 2.5 inch all around. To be honest with you, the back looks a lot higher than the front, but I think that's normal since we didn't use a spacer. I'm not 100% sure, but I know they do that on purpose on factory, so when you load the truck, it's even, it's not like sagging. I know they do that for sure. As alignment goes, you do not need A-arms. We did an alignment, and the alignment came out close to perfect. I think it was like a little off, or it was pretty perfect. I don't remember. Let me see if I have that paperwork real quick. So here's the actual alignment. As you can see, if you guys can't see it too well, I'll definitely take a picture and post it in the video somewhere here. But the alignment came good. You do not need upper control arms for a 2.5 inch lift, which was my biggest concern, because I didn't want to like go buy some, you know, $1,200 tires and they wear out because they're too cambered or the caster's off or whatever. So that was a really big worry of mine. And just so you guys know, there's finally a video on there that declares that on this setup, you do not need upper control arms, because I could not find nothing on YouTube. This is the first time I think we'll have some clear evidence that we don't need upper control arms. So as you can see, I'll do some before and afters of like what the truck looked like without the lift and what it looks like now. I'll take some B-roll shots, but I'm pretty happy. If you guys leave comments down below, I try to help you as best as I can if you guys need any assistance. And I'm also gonna put a link down for Toytec, because Toytec was the video I went off for the leaf springs, or the rear AAL leaf spring, and it should help you guys out. So let me take some measurements real quick so we can see exactly the before and after, and let's see what we got. And just FYI, obviously these wheels and tires are not from the 2nd gen. These are actually 3rd gen wheels and tires, so it might look a little higher than your truck if you have a 2nd gen. So yeah, let's get to it. And I know like this setup, you can do it for a 3rd gen too. They sell it online. All right, so I have my handy dandy Harbor Freight measuring tape, and the last time we took the measurement, we took it from here to the floor just to see where it was. I don't know if that's the proper way to do it, but that's the way we did it. So we'll see. I don't remember offhand exactly what the OEM one was, but we'll see right now. So we end up about 38 inches and a quarter. So let's go ahead and do the front now. All right, I got my handy dandy Harbor Freight special. So right now, we're checking the measurement in the front. It looked like we got 37 inches, 37 inches, 38 and a half. So All right guys, so that wraps this video. Thank you guys for watching. If you guys have any questions, please leave comments down below. I love you guys, and I'll catch you on the next one.